More woke colleges feel the axe. Bidengate just getting started. Trump does not win at SCOTUS every time. This is Dr. David D. Shine for Saving America with my own take on key stories from this past week focused on politics and business. Sometimes we compare turbulent times to roller coaster. I would say this is more like bumper cars right now. Good financial news for the Trump administration. Inflation falls to 2.4% in March, but concerns continue, of course, that the tariff wars will result in higher prices, at least near term. China and the U.S. are locked in a battle over tariffs. My pick is that the U.S. wins this big time. And if the U.S. wins over China, the world wins over China. A broke China equals a safer world community. And now, add to the entertainment, Trump suddenly announced a 90-day delay in U.S. tariffs. The stock market surged on that announcement, but then crashed again the very next day. As always, we provide no stock advice on this show. Just hang in there and trust the financial professionals that you work with. Predictions are a recession and higher prices by the so-called experts. Hey, let's see what really happens. Another piece of good news was that the jobs number came out well above the predicted number. That's 228,000 jobs, well above the predicted number for March and much higher than February. The unemployment rate rose to 4.2% from 4.1% in February. This is still well below the 5% so-called full employment number, so no panic there. Good people, the university funding cuts that I am hearing about causes me heart palpitations. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm thrilled with the cuts. $1 billion in federal funds and grants to Cornell University and $790 million to Northwest University have been frozen. The White House confirmed due to reported civil rights violations. This, of course, tracks well-publicized funding suspensions at Columbia and other woke schools, including fellow Ivies, Penn, and Brown. My question is, with the massive wealth that these colleges have, and of course they're tax-free, why is the federal government sending this kind of money to these schools? I can understand supporting HBCUs and small colleges and especially public schools. That's not what we're talking about here, folks. So I do have some real concerns about how this all got started in the first place, and I'm sure hoping that this is corrected. And I don't care if it's taken away because of DEI or woke or whatever it is. I think this needs to be taken away because they shouldn't need this money. It should go to needed public causes, including keeping Social Security and Medicare from going broke. The families of the October 7th victims in Israel sued Al Jazeera Network and its American affiliate Al Jazeera International for providing support to Hamas. The suit was filed in Washington, D.C., where Al Jazeera has an office. From my view, I have never understood why this clearly biased operation, reportedly funded out of Qatar, was ever considered a news source in the U.S. Even some Middle Eastern countries know that it is trouble. The suit names reporters who are believed to have been inside Hamas planning and therefore were able to provide reports of the horrors from that day very soon after the attack started. The hope is that a win in this case could cripple the U.S. operation, since despite concerns, it is still considered a news organization and not a foreign agent. Bidengate, it's just getting started. I like to support news outlets that give the slopstream media some competition. One of my recent go-to sources is the Washington Free Beacon, an email newsletter. They recently ran an article called Outstanding Work, Doctor, How Jill Biden's Lust for Power Saved America. It was written by Andrew Stiles. It reports on a new book by a couple of insiders that blow the lid off the fabrication that Joe Biden was actually with the program, as we say. The book is Fight Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House. It takes a hard shot at Jill Biden, who is blamed for continuing to push demented Joe as a candidate for her own desire to enjoy the accoutrements of presidential office. I can see her side to it, but frankly, it appears to have morphed into elder abuse. The tilt to the reference book is that by pushing Joe as far as she did, by the time the early debate exposed Joe's failings to the world, it was too late for the Dems to run a real candidate. They dropped in Kamala the Weird, one of the worst candidates in recent memory. Particularly damning is his quote regarding the care it took the staff to cover up for Biden, manage his calendar and his personal needs, which included almost daily sessions with a makeup artist to hide the physical signs of his age. As I've said before, Nancy Pelosi is older than Joe and the still greedy blank blank that she has been for years. Condition is the issue, not the actual age. I do not ascribe to the line about the running a better candidate. The fact is that the Dems are an ethically bankrupt operation and the public has figured it out. I don't think the Dems have a chance this past November due to the carnage they caused over the last 4+ years. Folks, check out some of the polls. 83%, 84% of Americans are standing for validation of voting and making sure that American citizens are the people voting. The Dems are polling at like 21%. It is time for the Dems to go away and to bring back at least something that resembled the original Democratic Party, because this is sure as heck not even an interesting operation. That doesn't mean the Republicans can let down their guard, because I remember when the Dems were on the floor and should have been trounced out, that Newt Gingrich and the batch of incompetent GOP folks back in the late 1990s let the Dems get back up on their feet. So let's not screw up twice in a row. Trump does not win at SCOTUS every time, contrary to many media reports. This is an oddball case that has garnered a lot of publicity. The background is that Armando Abrego Garcia, born in El Salvador, came to the United States illegally as a teenager, reportedly to escape gang violence at his home. Since 2019, he's lived outside Washington, D.C. with his wife, a U.S. citizen, and their 3 children, all of whom are also U.S. citizens. Immigration officials began efforts to deport Abrego Garcia in 2019. The issue is whether he was or is a member of the MS-13 gang. He lost the first round and was subject to deportation. The courts later granted him a reprieve. A piece of evidence was that the gang members in El Salvador continued to threaten and harass his family, and authorities in that country were and would be unable or unwilling to protect him from past or feared future persecution. Fast forward to March 2025, when ICE officers took Abrego Garcia into custody. He was sent to Texas and then to El Salvador's Terrorism Confinement Center. I agree with this for TDA and MS-13 gang members and others who have committed serious crimes, but I do agree with the judge in Maryland who ordered him to be brought back to the U.S. This case reminds me of the old cry wolf issue. If the loonies would only complain about someone with a legitimate case like this fellow, it might be easier to resolve this case. The vast majority of those shipped out are the worst of the worst. Why do we still have sanctuary cities and politicians arguing for the bad guys? It's a wrong approach. And let's settle this down and be more organized in getting rid of the bad guys. In any event, it initially looked like SCOTUS was going to rule for the Trump administration, but then changed its mind and ruled that Garcia needed to be brought back from El Salvador. As a fact, I believe he will be brought back in the next week or so. The ICC loses more ground. The ICC is the International Criminal Court. It made headlines a few months ago when it announced plans to prosecute Israeli leaders and specifically Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The U.S. and Israel are not in the ICC, and recently Hungary will leave the discredited operation. I think this is again underscoring the fact that we sadly have some international organizations that have become incredibly corrupt and very obviously anti-Semitic and in many cases anti-American. LA County will settle sex abuse claims for $4 billion. In a truly disturbing story and further evidence of the morally bankrupt mess formerly known as California, it is reported that due to years of abuse in juvenile facilities and foster homes, the county has agreed to pay out an incredible $4 billion. This is for 7,000 claims of abuse. The horror stories sound like every episode of Law and Order Special Victims Unit. Allegations of abuse, rape, and drugs, obviously. Equally troubling was that this went on for decades, and some of the alleged abusers were on the county payroll for years until very recently. I hope not a nickel of federal money is sent to bail out this rancid operation. It's time for California to fix itself. And when you see that the Californians are electing people like Newsom, like Adam Schiff, like Nancy Pelosi, they don't get the message, and they need to get the message that they need to get in line with Americans' moral values and business values. And until they do that, I don't want my tax dollars being corrupted over into California. The headline reads, "This ingredient in popular beverage is linked to cancer." That's scary. The story is especially bizarre because the drinks are supposed to be healthy beverages. The newsletter cites an article by the Daily Mail that the additive is inulin, a prebiotic fiber that helps feed healthy bacteria in the gut microbiomes by producing short-chain fatty acids, which can improve digestion by regulating bowel movements and preventing constipation. That's a quote. It is in popular drinks like Poppy and Olipop, which are promoted as being healthy alternatives to regular soda, maybe not so much. However, this additive may lead to digestive issues and cancer. They mention stomach cancer and colon cancer. The article notes that Pepsi acquired Poppy for $1.95 billion, maybe rethinking that after being sued for $5 million for claims that the drink is not really healthy stuff. On the other hand, there's been such a huge surge in consumption of such drinks over the last few years, you can see why Pepsi made the business decision. So I certainly hope this gets sorted out. And remember, many times we hear these reports of something being bad for you, and then later a different report comes out and says, well, maybe it wasn't that, it was something else. I don't drink any of these type of beverages, so I'm not super worried. This is Dr. David D. Shine. Thanks for joining me for this special edition of Saving America. Remember, a new Saving America show is aired on the Brushwood Media Network every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Listen on any of the 16 network stations, Apple or Google mobile app, Apple CarPlay, TuneIn, Smart Speaker, and all smart TVs. Find more information at the brushwoodmedianetwork.com. Please be sure to join us each week. We welcome and love your feedback from our growing audience.